Welcome to the ARC Hive Podcast, where we explore the arcs of our individual journeys and the strength of the hive that holds us together. I'm Amy Rost, and I believe that life isn't meant to be navigated alone. Here, we dive into the conversations that bring us closer together, to ourselves, to each other, and to the communities that lift us up. This is a space for real stories, honest reflections, and meaningful connection. Whether you're in a season of transition, seeking deeper relationships, or simply craving conversations that inspire growth, the Hive is for you. Because when we come together, we grow stronger. Welcome to the ARC Hive. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have you here today. We are going to talk about the power of showing up even when it's messy. And I feel like this is such an important topic. I feel like we often, hold ourselves back because we want to make it perfect. And I can tell you from running a business, from being a mom, from being a caregiver, from being a wife, oftentimes we just have to show up even when it's messy. And we're going to dive into this today because I think it's really an important topic, and I think it requires a little bit of reflection. So we all have those moments where we feel unprepared, like we're not ready enough, or we're really afraid to take action because it might not be perfect. Has this ever happened to you? Truthfully, it is never about perfection, it's about the presence. And I really want to dive in here because truthfully, this podcast would not have happened if I was waiting until I was ready enough. It really wouldn't have happened. If I was waiting for it to be perfect, you would never get an episode if that was the case, because it it's just not achievable and it's not realistic. And when we put that expectation on ourselves, it holds us back from really going for those things we want to achieve, be it a goal personally or professionally. And I think, as we kick off and dive into this a little deeper, maybe something to think about is I'd like you to think about a time when you almost didn't show up because you felt unprepared. And maybe what did you miss out on? And I think that second part is really, really key. What did you maybe miss out on because you were afraid to show up? Because really the problem of, with waiting until we're ready, it's it really does, it's a limiting factor. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a limiting belief. And, how many times have we put things off saying because I don't feel ready, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't, I don't have enough information. And really, that illusion of readiness that we could have all the ducks in a row, we could have all the ducks in a row. And truthfully, life is going to throw you a curveball. That's what living a life is. And it's a total myth thinking that you're going to be 100% prepared or 100% ready to do the thing that scares you. And really, showing up with consistency and showing up, repeatedly, even in small ways, is actually how we create momentum. And I can speak to this 100% because I also have a business course called The 100, and we have 100 days of actionable tasks. And the design and the idea behind this 100 course, this business course, was really creating forward momentum. If we get really stuck in that pattern of it has to be perfect, we won't take the action. We actually develop action paralysis. And what we want to think about is, what is the one thing I could do today to move me closer to whatever my goal is? And designing a course where you have to show up every day for 100 days is not a small feat for those participating, but the action is creating results. And that is really an awesome thing to witness as they go through this journey of building a business. Or if you've been in business a long time and you're looking to, you know, just reignite your passion for your business, this course really has been an honor really to watch these entrepreneurs go through. And it's really getting us out of that thought, whereas it has to be perfect. Sometimes it just has to be done. And again, sharing that story of, for me, of showing up before feeling ready on this podcast, it really, really, you would never get an episode if I waited for it to be perfect. Sometimes I have to film these a couple of times. Sometimes I actually can't even go back and listen because I'm afraid of too many ums and ahs and pauses right there, that it would prevent me from putting it out. And what I had to really just let that expectation go. And I had to say to myself, this is something that is important to me. It's something that I want to get out to the greater good, because I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had. Sometimes are happening behind closed doors, but how can I use this platform to inspire? And rather than it being perfect, let's just go for done. And I promise we'll probably get better as we go along. I find each week I'm getting a little bit better, a little more comfortable, but this is a new skill set for me. And, you know, showing up imperfectly, I hope demonstrates to you that you can do it too. And when we show up, showing that side of us, that everything doesn't look curated like on social media, is actually more relatable. And that can be true whether in business, in motherhood, or just when you're facing a personal challenge. And sometimes the hardest, we've talked about this. Sometimes the hardest part is just having the courage to show up. Because if we have courage to show up, we will build confidence. If we don't have the courage to do it, we aren't building the confidence. The confidence doesn't come first and then the courage. It actually goes the other way around. So taking that imperfect action actually can create growth in yourself, and it can create connection within your community, within your industry, within your business network, and with your own clients as well. So I think that's also, we forget about that piece. And living in a world of, where social media, you look at a very curated um, offering online. What made me really sad and made me really think about this was I was having a conversation with another mom, and we were talking about, how our kids then sometimes see on social media that everybody's having a perfect life. And let's be honest, none of us are if you're living a real life, there is no perfection. And it's really showing the real side. And it doesn't have to be the real, you know, your deepest, darkest secrets, but it can be like, hey, I'm a mom. Have you ever forgot to pick your kids up from school? I have. I have. I sent them to school on a PD day, and the school was calling me to pick them up because they actually didn't have school that day. And it happens. So again, it's showing that realness. So then when it comes to projects, I've had to learn over the years really not to take myself so seriously. And that's kind of a hard thing because I was really like a striving for perfection kind of gal, and I would say I'm recovering. But I'm also, I know, making really good inroads to letting that limiting belief or letting that ideal kind of drop away. And I think it comes a little bit, not gonna lie, with age and wisdom, that sort of starts to fall away, and you're like, if I sit here and wait for this to be just the way I want it, I'm going to be here twice as much for twice as long. And, I'm not going to get this to the people who need it. And that can be your offer. It could be just showing up at an event. It is moving through, having the courage to move through that comfort zone and taking that action, however small. And I highly recommend when I'm coaching, I really recommend that people start with what is a really low hanging fruit. What is one thing that you can do today that will create some momentum? Doesn't require you to be perfect, but is encouraging you to show up consistently towards whatever that thing is for you. And then I want to talk as well about how a community can, really hold you through the messy middle. And I talk about this with moms a lot. I never actually want to achieve balance. And because balance means something has to give and something's taking too much and something's going to give. I don't really like that image. For me, I really want to feel harmony so that I know there's times where my kids are going to need a little more of my time, and there'll be times where I know my work will need a little more of my time. But for me, it's like, how do I create harmony? And I think community plays a big part in this. The power of being seen and supported is huge. And I think it's one we need to not underestimate. So, how connection makes it easier to take risks and steps outside your comfort zone really is when you've got someone who you can connect or who's done it, right? That you can say, hey, I'm really trying to get this thing launched. I've seen you've done something similar. Do you have any advice? Or I'm stuck at this point. This is where it's great to have a really powerful network, have a coach, to have all these sort of tools and resources in place that help you get through that, walk outside that comfort zone. And that can also, don't, forget about your friends, your good girlfriends who, can walk with you and just say, you've got this, or I see how hard you're working. And just having that little bit of reassurance that you're on the right path. I also think, you know, the role of the hive is in the community holding you through tough times. And if we're all working to a greater good, and when I say greater good, what I mean is we are all working that, when you succeed, I succeed. It isn't when you succeed, I lose. It really isn't. There is more than enough to go around, whatever industry or personal goal you're working towards. It's never that at the expense of someone else. It's like we carry each other. And that's really where, for me, the hive came in here was that, when we work together, we all have our role. And there isn't, there's never any doubt or that should creep in when asking for help or asking just to share an experience. Could you take a look at this? Or could I ask you a question? And I think sometimes we do get caught up in we have to do it alone, right? Like I've got to run this business on my own. And the power really comes in that connection with your greater network, your greater community. A time for me where we're going to go back to the launching this podcast. My friend Carrie Miller, who was on an earlier episode here, and she'll be back because we have lots of these conversations. But she was very much, Amy, when's this podcast coming? And I was like, oh, I don't have time. I don't this. And sometimes, like, she never stopped asking. And she was there every step of the way. She listened to the first couple of episodes. She helped, is the sound okay? What do you think of this? And being there as I felt really unsure about putting myself out there in this capacity, in this new way, she was right there alongside me saying, "You've got this. People need to hear these conversations. They need to hear these stories." And that was the more important piece than it being perfect. And this podcast wouldn't have happened without her. So, high five to Carrie for walking alongside. I think the other piece of this, is letting others show up for you. And again, it's letting go of the idea that we as women have to do all the things because really we were never meant to do it alone. And we can't do all the things. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, and we get to use that time as we choose. It's a choice. And I think the hardest part about showing up and allowing others to see us in our messiness or in an unpolished and unfinished state is one of those places where we really need to dive deep into courage. Just have the courage to show up and show a little bit of the messiness because I know that clients relate far more to when it's a really relatable moment, be it in business, be it in motherhood, be it being in a marriage, all of those things. When they can see that piece that, oh, yeah, she does a lot of things and it doesn't always go well. And I've always been really I've tried to be very honest about the experiences, but I'm also a little bit cautious about, and mindful. Like, I don't share everything. I don't share the really messiness of a rare disease. If I share anything, I need to have permission from my oldest to share that. I can share my experience, but I don't think it's fair to share their experience. In business, another time that, talk about real messiness was, you know, March 2020. I was about to launch. We were 6 weeks out from launching Pilates Fest North, and the world shut down due to a worldwide pandemic. And in those days where, we were in really unprecedented time, that we were, really unknown how to even navigate. How do you navigate canceling an event 6 weeks out? But I really wanted to share, like, look, I always say, hey, I'm just a mom with a studio in her basement who loves Pilates and loves community. And that has always been so true. And as I was navigating this time that was very messy and so many pieces happening at like lightning speed of not knowing how to move forward, just being that, I found when I was really just honest with the reflection of what was happening, how things were progressing or they weren't progressing, or how we were moving forward, really being able to communicate that actually endeared me to more people than it didn't. And part of that was also letting go of the pressure. Like, in those days, for me, it was really about saying to me, I'm doing the best I can today, and that is enough. And I wrote that mantra so many times. And it was about how to let go of the pressure of having it all together and being able to navigate, like we said, an unprecedented time. And how was I still going to be able to create deeper and more meaningful relationships? And it was possible, but again, being in that moment, what tool could I bring to myself to help me walk through that? And again, showing that messy side, that imperfect side, um, and the real side, right? Running a business isn't for the weak of heart. There's a lot of ups and downs thrown your way. There's a lot of sometimes information coming at you. Sometimes you're dealing with lots of personalities. I always say, as a Pilates studio owner, like, you wear so many hats that actually aren't related to Pilates. And again, surrounding ourselves with people who can support you and guide you. This is where I think it is so important for us to have mentors, coaches, colleagues, friends, whatever that resource pool needs to look like for you is really bringing in people who you align with, who you feel safe with, um, who truly support you and don't expect that perfection from you. And really, when you find that hive of people that they just want you to be there and they want you to be real and they want you to show up as you are, because that really is your superpower. The next piece of this is really, why vulnerability builds that deeper connection. And I think sometimes, when we hear vulnerability, we're like, ooh, what does that mean? Like, what does it really mean? And I think sometimes if we reframe the word vulnerability to strength, think about that for a minute. Take the word vulnerability and reframe it to strength. It's powerful, right? Why being real and not perfect is actually what resonates with people. It's really hard to relate to someone who always looks put together, who, is, just perfect. I find that really hard to relate to because I feel like so many of my days are in a messy middle as a mom and a caregiver and a business owner. It doesn't also relate to my clients because they're also in the messy middle. They're moms, they're women, they're going through menopause, they're looking for community and so it doesn't relate, when if I'd only show that like, perfect all the time, it's also not realistic. And I think the other thing is when we share our struggles, it gives others permission to do the same, right? There's nothing better, right? When you're like having doubts of yourself and perhaps you're able to share it and someone says, oh, me too. And you're like, oh, I'm not the only one. We're not the only one. We're never just the only one. There's always someone else having a similar experience, just the ingredients might be slightly different. And giving them that permission to share really fosters and develops deep connection. And I think, there is something almost validating when you hear you aren't the only one. It's happened to someone else too, in a different way, at a different time, in a different setting, but there's pieces of that story of their challenge that is relatable. And we kind of as humans, as bees in the hive here, feel that connection deepen when you have those experiences. And I think, a moment that I can share when I was vulnerable in a way that deepened a relationship or an opportunity, it goes back to that Pilates Fest North, to the first one where we were canceled. And I remember being like, I don't know how to navigate this, but what I did say was I was willing to jump on a call with anyone who had bought a ticket. And I was happy to share where we were at. The reality of it was that, we were 6 weeks out. I'd already paid all the bills. Like the ticket money wasn't sitting with me. It had been already paid to the venue. And I was willing to have the conversation. And I would say 95% of those who were willing to jump on a call were like, thank you for jumping on the call and just sharing this realness and the update. There was a couple that weren't. And that's okay. Those, what it showed me is those weren't my people. But then what happened, what I felt in that moment, we made a deeper connection by just willing to jump on a call and share the really like nitty gritty of this. Like this, I'm a mom too, trying to feed my kids and take care of my family. And my business has been shut down too on top of an event. And it was really, really scary. but I also knew I could figure it out. But then when we actually came together in person, not till the November 2021, it was like something else had connected all of us on a deeper level than we could have ever predicted. And that was a really beautiful thing. And I think, if I would have just been like, nope, going to go back to the venue. I want my money back. I'm going to refund all the tickets and get out. I would have missed, I would have missed such an incredible opportunity and the real privilege of being able to bring Pilates teachers in Canada together. Um, and that we created a connection so much deeper than we could have ever imagined. And honestly, the messiness usually brings us to something even better than we could have imagined. And I think that's such a gift, that we need to remind ourselves and give ourselves, um, because we just never know. What if it's better than we thought? Rather than what if it's worse if we thought, let's not think that. Let's reframe that to what if it's even better than I could have ever imagined? And that feels good. That feels really good. So I want to talk about some practical ways to start showing up even when it feels messy. And I know it's going to make some of us really uncomfortable, but I really want you to think about these. So, the number one is take small, consistent action steps forward, even when it feels uncomfortable. Do not, and I say this in my business course, do not spend more than 10 minutes on an Instagram post or a social media post. Post it and walk away. Let it be messy, but you did it. Celebrate the win of you doing it. The result is not the in social media is not the be all and the end all, but taking that small action step, I like to say your inspired step, take your inspired action step to move it forward. What's the little thing you could do? What's a little thing you could do that makes you just a tiny bit uncomfortable? And interesting enough, in that business course, we talk about collaboration, we talk about getting seen, and we talk about taking steps to, even if it's making a connection with a teacher or entrepreneur or another mom who you've watched from a distance, and just sending them a quick DM saying, hey, I really appreciate your posting. I find it really relatable and helpful. That's how small I'm talking about these steps. I'm not saying make a big post and ask a big company to collaborate. That can come, but what's the small step? What's the small step? And it doesn't have to be social media. It could be even personally, just reaching out to someone and saying, hey, can we meet for a coffee? That can be scary, but it also can pay off. The next one is surround yourself with people who value presence over perfection, right? Find your girls who actually are in the weeds, like Brene Brown says, with you, who it's not perfect, and that's okay. So they can, they're there to support you, and you can say, hey, this wasn't my best day and this happened, da da da. But I'd also challenge you to do is to reframe that, like to add to that. And this is what I learned, because that's what makes it relatable. So sharing again, be mindful. You get to control how much you share. But when you're surrounded by those people who value that presence rather than are you showing up perfectly, that's a game changer. And the next one, number 3, is reframe the self-doubt as a sign that you're growing. One, there's always going to be self-doubt. I still have self-doubt, and I've done thousands of hours of Pilates teaching. I'm a teacher trainer and I'm a life coach. I've done a certification in that. And I still have moments where I'm like, okay, hold on. Whoa, I see you. I see fear. I see self-doubt. But what I do know is if I'm not uncomfortable, I'm not going to grow. And that's really where in that growth is moving through the fear, having the courage to move through the fear. And again, 9 times out of 10, it's better than we ever imagined. So let's sort of reframe here and let's reflect a little. So, I do want to give you your guided reflection for my listeners here. And so, when you get a moment, grab your journal and write in that journal, where in your life have you been waiting for that perfect moment? And what's one small way you can show up today just as you are? I'm going to say that again. So your guided reflection is, where in your life have you been waiting for the perfect moment? And what is one small way you can show up today just as you are? So write on that, because I think there's a lot of information we get about ourselves. And then, you know, what possibly could come out of this that could be greater than you ever imagined? And I'd love to hear. So tag me your responses and share. And yeah, let's continue that messy action that's really just showing us we're living a real life and we're doing the work. We're putting in the work towards our goals, no matter what they are. Thank you so much for being part of the archive today. I hope this episode left you feeling inspired, connected, and reminded that you are never alone on this journey. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your takeaways. Tag me on social media at arc.hive.podcast. And let's keep this hive buzzing. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and invite someone you care about to join us. Until next time, keep honoring your arc, leaning into the hive, showing up for yourself and your community, because together we are stronger. This is the ARC Hive Podcast. See you soon.